What's up, guys? I want to show you this Morbark M12R. We have to do the lower feed roller bearings, and I actually already did them, but I'm going to show you everything that went into it. This blue component right here is the lower feed roller bearing. This is why you open up that little door. See that little silver right there hanging down? That's your hatch. And if you don't open that hatch, then it gets filled up with a lot of debris and stuff, and it'll get packed in on the inside of this bearing right here. I mean, this is pretty well shielded, but these bearings were both bad. This one, all the balls fell out while we were running it one day. And this roller, you could tell because that roller was wonky and it was jamming up a little bit. But it was right at the end of the job. But yeah, it was starting to move around and stuff, and it's not supposed to do that at all. And you can test the top ones just by putting a block of wood in there with a pry bar. And you just pry up and down on it. But the bottom one, you can get under there and kind of jiggle it with your hands because you can lay right under it. So, this is what you do. Don't take these bolts off. Don't take these bolts off. These bolts look like they get you closer, but what they really do is they just loosen up the plate from the motor. The plate's not attached to this thing right here. This piece right here is called a B-lock coupling, B-LOC coupling. Now, it has, like, I forget how many, 8 maybe? 6 or 8, probably 8 bolts. And you have to get them with basically a combination wrench. There's not really enough room here for a ratchet. And they shouldn't be too hard to loosen up. The angle's not the best, but you just put your combination wrench on there and you bash them with a hammer a couple times and they should come loose pretty easily. This area did have this shroud. I don't really know how this was supposed to go on because it was just rusted off and hanging there. But it was underneath something like this. Really not sure how I got it on or off, to be honest with you. But oh boy, so that needs to be removed. Best of luck to you. I don't know how I did it. Maybe you take the yeah, you can't get to any of these bolts in here with that plate right there. So if yours is properly attached, feel free to say in the comments how it's supposed to be attached. It looks like it's got bolt holes here and here to hold it on. So I got that out. Once I got that out, I was able to get my combination wrench in here. I used 11/16. That was the wrong size. They might be metric, but it was a little bit sloppy. So I just put it on there and I whacked them towards the right with your left hand, which is really awkward. But you can see as you begin to try to turn it, it moves. It moves this whole entire bottom wheel. Once you loosen up all those bolts right there, these two pieces are two separate components, and they'll separate a little. And you can, once they separate, it loosens up a collet, and this motor and the shaft of the motor is able to pull out of that collet. This guy right here is a collet, and you can see it's got slits cut in it. It's kind of a spring metal. It's designed to have a close tolerance on the outside and a close tolerance on the inside. So for this one, the inner shaft of this die grinder goes inside it. That's a really nice fit, okay? It's got just enough to go on, okay? It's snug. It's kind of tough to get in and off. And then, obviously, here's your hole for the die grinder. And it goes into the die grinder here. And it's got a threaded portion on the top, okay? So, just like that, it threads together. And when you thread it, you compress. I can't do this with one hand, but all you're doing when you thread this is compressing that collet in. As this nut gets tightened onto the female gets tightened onto the male, the collet compresses in on the shaft of this device right here and holds it really tight. Once you take all those bolts loose, you can remove them all the way out. And all you have to do is jiggle this motor. This is a hydraulic motor, and pull it. And I used a piece of mechanics wire through one of these holes on this, and I wired it up to this handle. But you can just hang it anywhere, but you don't want it to hang from these hoses in case there's a defect or something, and then you'll stimulate a leak. So then you'll be ticked off as soon as you start running the machine again. Once you take this motor off, you'll see inside there, this one should come off pretty easy. The next one is going to be trapped inside the actual collet, the tapered collet part, which is the internal part that gets compressed. and you'll have to grab this and pull on it to get that to slide off. Now, if somebody like me worked on it before you, that might not come off as easy, because when I put it together, I had some trouble. I actually was bashing on the end of the shaft to try to get the last piece of the bearing off, and I mushroomed out the tip of the shaft, and I grinded it with a die grinder to try to get the collet to fit back on. But you can just pull this bad boy right off, and then the collet will come out with it, and then all you have left there is your main shaft, which is this here, and that shaft is a component of the feed roller. Okay, so like, I don't know if you can see the feed roller. Yep, I'm grabbing the feed roller down there. Okay, that's all one assembly, that feed roller plus the shank that sticks out of it right here. Okay, so what I had to use to get this off, because my outer section of the flange came off from the bearing. Basically, the race fell out, the balls fell out, everything fell out. So this was totally free from the inner section there. So there's also two little Allens right here. There's two of them that are just 90 degrees from each other. So let's see if you can see them there, right there. So right there's one and there's one, 3/16. So you loosen them up so that way it's able to come off the actual shaft. I used a die grinder. It was a little bit better of access for a small wheel like this. I've seen videos where a guy will take one of these big cutoff wheels, and that's fine, but the angle is not as good for getting this giant wheel in there, because you can't get up as close to the main body of the chipper, and it would cause trouble. So, because I have a good air compressor and everything, but if you don't have one of these guys, you might be out of luck. You really need a die grinder or a 4.5 inch grinder to do this job. So then once you get the bearing internal ring off, then you can clean up the main shaft a little bit on the feed roller, and should be able to get that bad boy on there without too much difficulty. I did clean it up with some of this 3M sort of material that goes on this die grinder, or this 90. And when I put it on, I used a 1 7/8 socket, which was a good fit for the internal part of that, because you don't want to hit on the outside flange. And then once it was in a little bit too deep, I couldn't reach it. I have a ball joint press, and I got this piece out of my ball joint press kit. You can also use probably a brass punch and just go around it in a circle. But if you're having trouble with your fit on getting the flange, getting the bearing onto the shaft, you're going to be frustrated trying to do it that way. You really want a nice even strike. But I will say, like, I was even hitting this just on one side, and the bearing was sliding on. I used some Vaseline to help make it. A lot of people use that for assembly lube, so I put some Vaseline to help it slide on a little bit better. It went right on. The other side is kind of easy. Let's see what we can do here. All right, so this side was a lot easier, a lot less disassembly required. All I had to do was take these 4 bolts out, which were easy. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention those, but take these 4 bolts out and, you know, slide it off. This side slid off completely easy with no problems. But you can see, as demonstration here, this little channel right here area, dirt and filth can really get jammed up in there, especially you can visualize if this is shut, right? Dirt and filth could really get compacted up in there and go inside that bearing area, and that's why you run this with this bottom door down, even though it's a headache and it causes the ground to be a giant mess whenever you run the machine. But you really got to watch that and make sure this area is not jam-packed full of filth, because that's what kills these bearings. And it's most likely the reason why a lot of people prefer the Vermeers, because they have a solid floor and they don't make a mess on the ground, and they don't have these lower feed bearings to go bad. But I like my lower feed wheels. I think they're great. I think they work awesome, and this bottom roller helps the machine a lot. So that's just my personal opinion. But if you're gonna run this with this shut, that should only be on like live trees. When you get to the dead ones, that's when you run into a lot of problems. So this is, you know, what it looked like when it was all packed full of debris and filth. And there's a different shield on the new ones that I put in. So that shield was completely blown out on that other one when it fell apart. I mean, you can see there's nothing in here. No balls, no nothing. And all this crap right here, this is the reason why they fail. There's a lot of power turning this and pushing this. And that stuff is all in that slot right there. That's supposed to be an open slot, look. That's all full of filth and dirt inside there. That's not supposed to be there. I don't know if when you grease it, it's supposed to push out some of that dirt. I'm not really sure. But I think it'd be much better to just keep that door open all the time and deal with the cleanup. And this is what my piece looked like after I cut it in half. And I had to cut all the way through it. You couldn't partially cut it and then break it. I tried heating it up with a torch. That didn't work. I have an acetylene torch. I heated it up red hot and it would not budge. Don't even bother trying it that way. Just cut it. If it's stuck, just cut it and try using 2 pry bars and go both sides, and you might be able to get it like that, but you're going to have to probably cut it. And obviously make sure that your set screws are loosened up before, because obviously if they're jacked in there, no matter what you do, you're probably going to have a lot more trouble getting it off. Once the bearing is off, you have to put a jack and then like take a piece of wood and stand it up on the jack to lift the bottom feed roller. Otherwise you'll need a guy to hold it up, because the bearing won't actually go on because of this frame rail unless you lift up kind of and put it into the right positioning for installation. So you either have to put a jack under it or you need a buddy to lift up on it, or you just gotta, I guess if it's a really easy install, you can get down there and lift up on it and then slide the bearing on. So that's it, guys. I hope that's a help to you. I was a little frustrated when this happened, but I knew it was destined to happen at some point, and it was better. I don't know, it's the time of the year when I can afford to miss a day or two probably. We've had pretty busy work for a while, but you can count on it to happen at a time when you're working. When you're not working, nothing breaks down, you know? So anyways, you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.